Hello, everyone. This is Priscilla, and this is my presentation on gender specific beginning choirs, why they matter, and how to effectively manage them. Are there benefits to separating beginning choirs by gender? That's the question that I asked myself before I started looking up any studies on the subject. And after reading them, the answer that I came up with is yes. For three reasons. One is recruitment and retention is better. The physiological needs of the male changing voice are met in a better way. And also, the psychological needs of the adolescent experience are also met. Since 1989, the ratio of boys to girls enrolled in choral programs is 5 to 2, and there isn't any new research that suggests that that's gotten any better. Dame in 2011 concluded there was a strong relationship between gender split choirs and a higher percentage of retention between 6th and 7th grade. The same study showed a 68% retention rate for males when enrolled in gender specific choirs from 6th grade through the 8th grade versus a lower than 44% for those males who were in a mixed choir, showing the strong relationship between having a boys only 6th grade choir and keeping them through middle school. He also concluded that the primary reason for male adolescents leaving choir is because they're not being well served in current choral programs. And he said that it was because these two needs, the physiological needs and the psychological needs, were not being met for them. So I looked to other studies outside of the music education sphere, since there's a lot of studies that have been done on the subject regarding gender specific classrooms. And adolescents do better academically when in separate environments, or at least that's what the research shows. A study done in 2009 by Stevens showed that single sex classrooms at the study site showed a greater academic gain over mixed sex classrooms. This was in the areas of math and reading. The way she ran this study was she had the 5th grade of a school split into 3 classrooms, one with boys only, one with girls only, and one with mixed gender. She taught the teachers gender inclusive strategies, which they all employed. And at the end of the study, when the kids took the same test they took before the study, well, not the exact same test, but a similar test, they showed that they had improved significantly. At least for those kids who were in the gender specific classroom, had done much better. And so this intrigued me regarding the gender inclusive strategies. And if you look at the lists, you can pause the video if you want to and read through them. Some of them are stereotype confirming, I thought, and some really caught my attention. For example, at the very bottom of the list for the girls, it says academic failure equals failure of self and disappointment to others. Whereas for boys, academic failure equals failure of subject. And I thought this was really interesting. However, there were some like girls enjoy using music, drama, and dancing to express feelings, whereas boys love sports and action figures more, that I thought were more stereotype confirming. But the results of her study showed that when these strategies are employed in the classroom, the kids did better, at least in math and reading. And there are several studies like this as well outside of the music ed classroom. Going back to the two needs that Dane pointed out that are not being met, the physiological needs are really important because adolescent males are actually going through voice changes much earlier than previously thought. In a study done in '84 on 6th grade boys, it showed that at the end of their 6th grade year, 50% of them were leaving with changed voices. Whereas in '99, over 81% of them were leaving with changed voices. So that's a huge increase. There has not been a more recent study done to see if that percentage is increasing, staying the same. I would be interested to see one done in the near future. I found a method by Teresa Pritchard, and she wrote this amazing article about the importance of working with the kids, with the male adolescents through the change of their voice. And this method that she developed called the A4 method. Again, you can pause the video if you want to look at what that is. But she basically had all the boys try to find A4, and it took them sometimes a couple of weeks. And this is in middle school. And once she had them do this for a period of time, this method, by the spring semester, it showed that they were singing a lot more in tune, singing better through the crack of their voice, the passaggio, and were more confident than before she used this method. So I was happy to see that there are methods that are being developed to address that physiological need. One interesting finding that I saw, and maybe because I'm a female singer, I never thought about this, is a physiological um, is the fact that physiological voice change in male adolescents causes psychological distress for many of them. Um, and there was a study done in 2014 where the researcher asked, how do the boys experience their voice change? And why do they choose to leave or stay in choir? So basically, he was asking, their voices are going to change. What is their experience in choir? And how does that experience affect the decision to stay or leave? And he used the theory of identity based motivation. It was really interesting. I had never heard of this theory before. Basically, it talks about how adolescents develop conceptions of their possible selves. So it's envisioning their future selves and what they might be doing and how they might accomplish that. It happens during early and late adolescence. There's 6 stages, and it's divided into two main steps. So conceptualization happens in early adolescence, and realization happens later in adolescence. So that's more high school, and that's a realization of their concept of what they might be. So the two that I put in bold, thinking and imagining, are the ones that are happening during sixth and seventh grade, and sometimes in eighth grade as well. And that is thinking about who they might become and then imagining that. And two of the things that really struck me were teacher role models and how important the way that a teacher handles the boy um, through the vocal change and how she approaches that vocal change impacts the child. This was a qualitative study, and so a lot of the interviews that he did reported back, or the boys reported that they wish that their teachers would have been more patient with them, that she would have explained a lot more of what was happening with them. That's where the vocal pedagogy comes in place. They wish that they would have known more about the anatomy and the physiology, and that one day it's going to settle. Also, peer influence was big right there for them, having boys around them that were going through it with them as well. And then on imagining, that is when they can see how they're going to get to where they want to get. So older role models really made a big difference there. That's having a boy about 3 to 5 years older, maybe a high school boy, an older brother, older cousin, somebody that they look up to that is going down the path of where they want to be. So as a singer, it's important to have those uh, role models around them of what they can become. And that's where, in the imagining stage, that's where a lot of them lost their vocal identity, as they were good singers before the voice change began. And then when their voice change started and the teacher didn't know how to handle it and they felt lost, they felt like they lost their identity. So again, handling of the voice change was very critical, and older role models were key. 85% of the boys who remained in choir had a very specific and identifiable vocal male role model, and the boys who withdrew had none. Um, these are two quotes from the study that struck me. One boy said, "My voice change was like torture. I had the most precious thing taken from me, my soprano voice." And another boy said, "I was singing at school when my voice changed. Now I don't want anyone to hear me. So when I want to sing, I sing silently." And those struck a really deep chord with me, and just it hurt me to think that there might be boys singing, sitting in my classroom, that are going through this and just rather not sing, and I may be assuming that it's for other reasons. So um, this is a prevailing thought among male adolescents, thinking that once their voice changes, they were good singers before, they're not good singers anymore. And that's what his research found a lot in this in the interviews. Another common thread amongst the research studies that I read is that choral singing has just a big, uh, deep gender conforming or non gender conforming stereotype attached to it. When boys are in choir, they are thought to be feminine, girly, gay, and they are taunted by other boys for being in choir. A study done in 2017 found that male peer pressure is highly triggering for male choral singers. And choral singing is seen as gender transgressive rather than gender conforming. In that study that he did in 2017, the male choral singers performed significantly worse when in front of non-choir male peers. And in the survey that they filled out after their performances, a lot of them suggested that it was the opinion of their male peers, not their female peers, that mattered the most. There was only one out of the 18 choirs that were tested that was seemed to be unaffected, and they were predominantly from the Pacifica community in New Zealand. And in this culture, singing for males is seen as a good trait, as a masculine trait. So that would explain as why they were not ashamed to sing in front of the entire body at their school. In 2015, Powell ran a similar study. It was a qualitative study that seemed to suggest that the same gender transgressive stereotypes are perpetuated through choirs of all age groups: middle school choirs, high school choirs, university choirs, and even community choirs. Um, that's why Paul Key in 2015 wrote this article suggesting that we employ a model of spectrum of masculinities. And that means that we treat the choir like the bass choir, not necessarily the men's choir or the boys' choir. And the treble choir sounds a lot better than the ladies' choir or girls' choir because that's a lot more affirming of non-binary genders, and we can embrace that spectrum of masculinities. Um, so, what questions are still unanswered for me? How does a middle school choir curriculum, which employs a spectrum of masculinities, look like? I would be very interested to see one or develop one myself for my students in our strive to retain boys. Are we missing to meet some of the needs of our middle school girls since a lot of them stay around? Are we not doing enough research to see how can we best serve them as well? And lastly, does positive peer pressure outweigh the effects of negative peer pressure and effect of gender conforming stereotypes? That means, will positive peer pressure from older role models, but not much older, 3 to 5 years old, older than them, is that going to outweigh the taunting and the jeering of boys in the school that might be teasing them for being in choir? So that I think a lot of the research that will be done in the area of choral studies and music education will be done around this topic in how can we further a gender inclusive and gender affirming or non-binary gender affirming um, environment for our kids. So this is a topic that I dove into and I hope to keep on learning more about in the future. Thank you.